The Sliger SM580 is a pretty impressive and relatively compact small form factor case given what you can fit inside it. This case slipped under the radar a little given that I had already reviewed the smaller and very similar SM550 and SM560. I didn't really feel much reason to make a dedicated video for the SM580. But just because I didn't review it straight away doesn't mean that I don't recommend it. In fact, it's a very well ventilated and pretty compact small form factor case, and it is actually in stock and available to buy most of the time. In this video, I want to compare the Sliger SM580 to other small form factor cases that can fit a 240 or 280ml liquid cooler like the Ncase M1 or DA2, and we'll also discuss the best approach to reducing thermals and noise levels in this case. So if you've seen my review on the Sliger SM550 or SM560, you'll probably know what to expect when it comes to the larger SM580. These cases have the same footprint, but whereas the smaller Sliger cases are relatively limited with CPU cooling, only allowing up to 55mm of clearance, the SM580 supports up to 280mm radiators. We'll talk more about this in just a minute, but if you don't mind the slightly larger volume on your desk, then I'd definitely recommend considering the SM580 as first preference. Compared to the Ncase M1 and the Streacom DA2, the Sliger SM580 is the least exterior design focused of the three. While the M1 and DA2 have a sleek, minimal approach, the SM580 is more of a no fluff approach. By no means does it look bad, but the look is very straightforward. One thing I will comment on though is the inconsistency when it comes to the ventilation cutouts. We've got rectangles on the sides, then circles at the top, more open rectangles at the bottom, and then rounded rectangles at the rear. Bit of an odd choice, and I would have liked to see this be a bit more consistent. The volume comes in at 16 liters, making this the largest sandwich layout case that I've personally come across. Typically, this hardware layout is reserved for cases around 10 liters and under. I'd say that any larger than this layout just wouldn't make much sense, but here I'm confident it does. One reason for that is the support for 3-slot graphics cards up to 320mm in length and 133mm in height, and specifically the way that it's mounted in the case. Despite Streacom's DA2 being a bit larger at 17.5 liters, it only has support for 2-slot cards. The Ncase M1 can fit 3-slot cards also, but the fans need to pull air from below the case, and this isn't going to be as ideal as pulling air from the side. The other advantage that the Sliger SM580 has for graphics card support and cooling is due to the fan positioning. Under the graphics card you can mount up to two 140mm fans, and above the graphics card you can mount another two 140mm fans with or without a 280mm radiator. This means that if you are using an open air graphics card, those fans can assist the exhaust airflow of the card and improve thermal and noise performance compared to if the fans weren't there. Oddly enough, Sliger actually recommends the opposite, running the bottom fans as intake, so I did some thermal testing here just to double check. Of course, if you're not going with the vented panels, bottom fans as intake would be preferred, and that does make sense. If you're running a 3-slot RTX 2080 Ti and you want to run it as quiet as possible, outside of a custom loop, this would be one way to achieve that. The other advantage of having 3 expansion slots is that you can run 2 PCIe devices off of the one slot on your motherboard via PCIe bifurcation. You will need to purchase the special riser for that to work though, and also double check that your motherboard supports it. For CPU cooling, it's pretty evident that this is a liquid cooling focused case. Don't bother running an air cooler here because the clearance is only 55mm. 280mm AIOs can be mounted at the top, however, not all 280mm radiators will fit. For example, Sliger note that the Corsair H115i and Cooler Master's Liquid Pro 280 are incompatible, but NZXT's Kraken X62, X63 and Z63 won't be an issue. For the side panels, you've got 3 options: a blank non-vented panel, an acrylic window panel, and the fully vented panel, which I highly recommend. To be honest, cable management is quite tough in the SM580 just by virtue of how much hardware you have in here, mainly fans, so this isn't really an interior I'd like to show off with acrylic panels anyway. Alright, so let's jump into CPU thermals. We're running a 9900K overclock to 5 GHz at 1.248 volts in a Blender render for 20 minutes. The cooler that I've used here for the SM580 is the new Kraken Z63 280mm AIO. Pump speed has been set to max and fans at 1700 RPM. And the results here are very respectable. Personally, I was expecting the SM580 to beat the Ncase M1, seeing as it supports a 280mm AIO as opposed to a 240, but the location of the radiator isn't as ideal. In fact, it's very similar to the radiator positioning of the Ghost S1 when that uses a 240mm radiator, and that configuration runs 10 degrees warmer than the Ncase. CPU thermals are also around 2 degrees cooler when having the bottom fans as exhaust and not intaking air through the bottom. I think we'd all agree that this isn't a significant difference though, so really it is up to you. So CPU thermals are pretty good, but it's the GPU thermals that really blew me away in this case. In fact, the SM580 is 3 degrees C better than any other case that I've tested here, running our 2-slot GTX 1080 Ti. To be fair, it also has the most fans located around the GPU as well, so although this is a surprising result, you just have to take one look at the case for this result to be explained. When we switch the bottom fans to intake, that's pulling air from below the case and towards the graphics card, we end up fighting the desired exhaust airflow direction of the GPU, and so thermals are around 3 degrees C worse after 20 minutes. In other sandwich layout cases, we'd see this difference be a bit larger, but due to how much ventilation there is in the SM580, it does make slightly less of an impact. In summary, the Sliger SM580 is a brute force airflow monster, and if you want to run a 3-slot RTX 2080 Ti and as quiet and as fast as possible, this case should definitely be towards the top of your list. CPU thermals are slightly better in the Ncase M1, but virtually equal. A 2 degrees C difference really isn't worth fussing over. So when deciding between the 3 of these cases, and yes, of course, you have plenty of other compact options too, but these 3 seem to be the most popular, you really need to weigh up how much you care about how your system looks, the thermal performance, and whether you're willing to wait around. Let me explain. While the Sliger SM580 and the Streacom DA2 are readily available to buy pretty much at any given moment, the Ncase M1 is a lot harder to get your hands on. All 3 of these cases can handle a 9900K or 3950X when using their respective largest liquid coolers, and high-powered GPUs like an RTX 2080 Ti will run fine in all 3 also, just with varying thermals and noise levels. Pricing for the SM580 is the dearest of the 3 at $270 US, but that does include free shipping in the US. Still though, that does sting a little when the quality and finish isn't as clean as the M1 or DA2. And of course, you don't just have these 3 options, you've got tons of different compact case options out there, but I feel like the SM580, the DA2, and the Ncase M1 are kind of directly competing against each other in terms of what they support and the amount of cooling and sort of compatibility that they offer. So if you are interested in these cases, I will leave them linked down below. As always guys, a huge thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next one.